When we hear a piece in sonata form, we're essentially listening out for three main sections of music, and those are the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation, and different things happen in each of those sections. And in this video, we're going to have a look at this thing called the exposition. Exposition. I like to think of this exposition section, the bit right at the start of a sonata form movement, as really setting the scene for what is going to come later. We'll definitely get the piece's character established, and we'll also hear most of the main melodic ideas that will be important as the piece unfolds. In most sonata form movements, we're actually introduced to two main melodies at the beginning of the piece in the exposition. And these melodies have special names. They are the first subject. Some people say first theme, but I quite like first subject. It just reminds us that this is kind of what it's about. It's a bit like the subject of an email. And alongside that first subject, we have a second subject. And the second subject is often contrasting in some way, so it'll often be in a different key. It'll almost always be in a different key, and it'll probably have a different character as well. So with the first subject of a sonata form movement, that melody that maybe starts the piece or is introduced quite near the beginning of the music will be dramatic. It might be that the second subject is very lyrical and singing, and so composers tend to play their first and second subject off against each other to produce a variety of characters within what is probably going to be quite a long and expansive piece of music. How are we introduced to these two subject melodies? Well, often they are introduced to us in the same kind of way. And actually, if you listen to quite a few pieces that use sonata form, you get quite used to hearing, oh yeah, that's the first subject, I can recognize that, and I'll just store that away because it's important to remember. And then you expect the second subject to be coming along pretty soon after we've finished hearing the first subject. So our composer will often start with the first subject. Sometimes there might be a sort of introduction type section. That could be some slow music to kind of build our expectations and our excitement, but if there isn't anything like that, we'll tend to start the piece off with our first subject, and it'll be a clear melody. You'll probably find it's quite a memorable melody that will come back at other points in the piece, so the composer wants you to remember that melody. After the composer's finished introducing us to this first subject, we tend to find that the music will modulate, and that's because we need to prepare ourselves to hear the second subject for the first time. Now, the second subject is normally in a related key to the first subject. So imagine if we had a piece where the first subject was in D major, we could probably predict that the second subject will be in either the dominant key or the subdominant key, because that's what tends to happen. So we have this second subject that will be in a related key. If it's in a minor key, often the second subject is in the related major key. So if the first subject was in A minor, we could probably expect this second subject melody will be in C major. Now, to get us from music that was in A minor to music that is in C major, we probably need some kind of connecting passage, and we tend to call this the bridge passage. So this is some new music that comes on after we've heard the first subject, but isn't really the second subject. It's just a bridge that helps us to get from the key of the first subject to the key of the second subject. So modulating from the first subject key to the second subject key, which is often a related key to the first subject. Once we get to the end of the second subject, we've kind of been introduced to these two important melodies that we're going to hear over the course of the piece, and that's quite an important stage to have reached. Often composers, especially in the classical period, choose to actually repeat that whole section all over again, just so that we're completely sure that we've got the hang of those two melodies and we'll be able to recognize them when they come back later in the piece. So now we've set the stage, we've been introduced to these melodies and we've got to know them quite well, and so the composer is now maybe a little bit freer to go on and experiment and develop some of these ideas a little bit further, and so that's exactly what we'll find in the next section of music that's known as the development section.